All right, I think, which means I don't know, but I think we are finishing our series on doubt today. Don't laugh, Crystal. It was a 3-week series, and we're on week 5. And last week was supposed to be the final week, and it turned into more than that because we got into runaway emotions, and it ran away with me. Oh, my drummer's gone. I was like, but we're talking about emotionally driven doubt. We talked last week about runaway emotions, when your emotions get the best of you. And can I just be really, really honest with you? After I preached it last week, I dealt with it this week. Did anybody else deal with emotional battles this week and having your emotions run away with you? I thought, why did I preach that? Because now I have to deal with it. And my emotions would start to get the best of me, and then I would hear myself preaching, and that would make it worse. But God is gracious, and He helps us to navigate that. But this morning, the last part, at least in my notes, the last part I want to talk about is something we call doubting for joy. Doubting for joy. And so this one is going to be a challenge because I thought very hard about skipping this one. I really did. I said, I've done enough. But let me ask it this way. Have you ever wanted something to be true in your life so badly that you were reluctant to test to see if it was really true? That is doubting for joy. You want it to be true so badly. Maybe you've believed for it time after time only to be disappointed or let down. And the thought of believing for it again, it's like, I just don't think I can do it. And so you put up this wall, so to speak, or you protect yourself, and you're like, well, if I don't put myself out there, I can't be hurt. If I don't take a chance and act in faith, and if I don't really believe for it, then I can't be let down. Because some things in life are easier to deal with if they're just wishful thinking. If I don't believe for it and it happens, I'm excited. But if I do believe for it and it doesn't happen, I'm disappointed. So sometimes we protect our hearts, we protect our minds, we protect our spirits by saying, you know what, I'm just not going to believe for it at all, and I'll just be like, hey, if it happens, great, whatever. But I found in my life when I do that, it's a horrible way to live. Because what it feeds in my life, instead of looking forward to something, I'm always looking back at some things that didn't go so well. Happy birthday, Charity. She told me to keep that to myself, but I remembered I wasn't supposed to. But doubting for joy, sometimes we want something to be true so bad. But what if we get let down? I remember telling somebody one time, I'm like, you know what? I'm believing God for stuff, but I'm so concerned that I'm going to be disappointed again. How many times of disappointment can we handle? How often do we protect ourselves in thinking, if I don't put myself out there, I can't be left hanging? This is a heavy battle. And you're going to understand why I wanted to skip it. Let's look in Scripture in Luke 24. And we'll try to read through this one quickly because it's very pointed. Jesus, when He appeared to them after His resurrection, when He had said this, He showed them His hands and feet. And while they look at this, while they still did not believe it, because of joy and amazement. So think about that just for a minute before we keep reading. He's there. He's like, here's my hands. Here's my feet. This is me. And they're like, maybe. We would love for it to be you. But what if it's not? What if it's not really you? What if this is a mirage? What if this is some apparition? What do we do if all of a sudden we're like, oh, yay, and then you disappear? Because of joy and amazement. They were like, "Ooh, this could be the greatest thing." But instead, we'll assume nothing is changing because of joy and amazement. And so he asked them, "Fine, do you have anything to eat?" He's like, "Let's take it a step further. Do you have anything here to eat?" And so they gave him a piece of New York strip steak. I'm allergic to fish, so I'm going to change it. They gave him a piece of broiled fish. He took it and he ate it in their presence. Why? Because he's like, "Look, would something fake be able to eat the fish?" So the Lord, let me say this up front. The Lord is not bothered by the need to prove himself to you. What he is bothered by is when you don't give him the chance to prove himself to you. Oh, let's maybe say that one again. The Lord is not bothered by needing to prove himself to you. He is bothered when we don't give him the opportunity to prove himself to us. Do you have anything to eat? They could have said, "Psh, no," and not given him a chance to prove himself. And so sometimes our thought is, "I'm just not going to put myself out there. I'm just going to assume that I know better than him." Think about what they just experienced. Just a quick recap. He had made himself known to them as Messiah. They're like, "Oh, goody, goody, goody." They're excited. They're in his cabinet. Peter was the Secretary of State. John was the Attorney General. Not really, but they've got these guys close, and they're convinced that the kingdom is about to be set up, and they're asking him questions like, "Can we have the prime seat in the kingdom? Or we're ready." He's the Messiah. He's the one everybody has been looking for, and his closest friends get to be a part of it, like in a way that nobody else was. And they're pumped. They're excited. And they're looking for the kingdom. They're looking for the establishment of it. And then they watch as he's arrested, carried off, brutally beaten and crucified. To the point that they couldn't even stick around. They ran away because of fear. And then they start hearing reports and stories. "Oh, we saw him." And it started with the former prostitute who said she saw him at the tomb. And then two guys walking on the road come running back. He's like, "Hey, we walked with him." And they're like, "Stop, just stop." And there's all of these reports. And then they're all together. And this fella shows up and says, "Hey, I'm him. Look." "Yeah, you kind of look like him. You could be Jesus. Or you could be Billy. We're not sure. Maybe, just maybe, you've got a doppelganger. This could be the stunt double of Jesus." Right? Sometimes in our lives, we're like, "Well, this may not be the real thing." And so all of this is going on. They're not sure, can they be vulnerable enough to believe that this is really the Messiah? Can you imagine the tension of that moment? Whew. What if we fully embrace this person in this moment, only to have it slip through our fingers again? What do we do? You've ever been there? You're like, "Man, this could be exactly what I've always wanted. This could be exactly what I've always prayed for. This could be exactly what I've always dreamed of. But what if it's not?" And so we doubt for joy. We protect our emotions. We protect our heart. But by trying to protect our emotions, by trying to protect our heart, we end up hurting the very thing we're trying to protect. Because we keep ourselves from receiving, we keep ourselves from being blessed, we keep ourselves from doing anything that moves forward. So how does this affect us? Number one, in all of our lives, there's usually one place that still hurts. How many of you have at least one place that still hurts? Doesn't even have to be physical. How many of you have more than one place that still hurts? No. Do I hear 7? No. This is the place we normally want to keep closed off from believing. We have those closets, right? Those hidden compartments, those boxes. We're like, okay, God, you can deal with this, you can deal with this, but don't go there. Right? You watch it happen in people's lives. You can watch it. God's dealing with people's lives, and then he starts getting too close for comfort into the area that's the most painful, and they pull back. And then they come back around, hoping he forgot. And then he gets there again, and they're, wait a minute, I'm not okay with that. And so we have that area in our lives that still hurts, it's still painful, and the disciples are still thinking, why did he have to die? We thought he was the one. But, catch this, the circumstances that he went through did not change the truth that he was the one. His death didn't change who he was, and his resurrection sure proved who he was. But the challenge many times is, well, this didn't go the way I expected it to go. And I just can't. I believed God to do that before, and he didn't, so I can't believe again. I remember we talked about this at the mothers and fathers family brunch, about the process we went through, Kim and I, to have Josiah. And so many times along that process, it was like, God, I just can't believe again. Just can't do it. Because what if I'm let down again? We were pastoring in Carthage. I remember telling a guy at a prayer meeting one time, he's like, oh man, it really feels like we're close to seeing God start doing great things. And I said, I sure hope so, but I'm so afraid I'm going to be let down again. It's real. It's real. And we could so easily try to guard and protect ourselves and say, how do I know he'll do it this time? But many times the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we know he didn't do it last time? Just because it may not have gone the way we would have chosen or preferred, doesn't mean he didn't do something. He's the Messiah, going to set up his kingdom. Yeah, but not on earth. He came to establish the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, but not on earth specifically. That's what they were looking for. It didn't go that way, and here he is back. They're like, we don't know about this. What if he leaves again? Oh, he's about to, but in a whole different way. Can you believe? Number 2, openness in this area of hurt would leave us extremely vulnerable. No, I don't think so. You want to see somebody walk out of a room? Touch the hurt. You want to see resistance happen in people's lives? Get a little too close to the most painful spot, right? Now, I'm not trying to be a jerk about that. I just know the reality of it is we all have areas in our lives we would prefer that nobody talk about, that nobody touch on, and even God leave it alone. But can I tell you the most important thing that we can have in our lives is to allow God to heal the deepest hurt in our lives? If we would truly allow him to go to that place we don't want him to go, we would see him take us to places we didn't know we could go. But oh, Brother Rodney, you just don't know. I know I don't know specifically, but I know about this guy. And I know how guarded I can become and how guarded I can be. And I also know this, and I'm trying to understand what it is that God is doing, because you know what Crossroads is becoming? It's becoming a safe place and a place for healing. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that and what that looks like, because sometimes healing is messy, but it's okay. We'll navigate through it. But God wants you healed. And He wants all of us whole. And I know sometimes vulnerability is no fun. What if people see the real me? Trust me, they already do. Right? Usually the only person you have fooled, somebody already beat me to it, is yourself. Whoo! The one area we want to be true the most, another letdown would be devastating. On Christmas Day of 97, my nephew lost the battle of brain cancer. He was 19. And I carried that since that day, and I missed, he was like, we were a year apart, really close. More like a brother to me than a nephew. When you're from a big family and, I have a niece who's older than me, so in school she would call me uncle and people thought she was joking. So when you have a big family, it's just kind of weird. But he passed in several, it had been, that was in 97, and then in 2018 or 19, I was having coffee with a pastor friend of mine, and he shared with me, he said, not a lot of people know this yet, but I want you to know I've been diagnosed with cancer. He goes, and I need you to pray. And immediately, my first thought was, I can't pray for that. I already lost there. 20 years had passed. But it instantly brought that back. You know what I'm saying? Is that all right? Does that make sense? It instantly brought that back. Whoa. And he looks at me and he goes, are you all right? I said, I need a minute. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't go through this again. In that battle of, can I really believe when it's an area that hits really too close to home? Not easy, is it? Can we be vulnerable? Can we believe God? Faith, here's what faith requires. Faith requires that every situation is viewed as though it's the first time it's ever been viewed. I was asked to say that again, so I will. Hopefully I remember it. Faith requires that every situation is viewed as though it is the first time it has been viewed. Meaning I can't look at a situation through the eyes of the past. I have to look at the situation through the eyes of the I am, who is present and current. So it affects us, a place that hurts. It requires vulnerability. And number 3, if we're not careful, that area can be allowed to become an idol in our lives. And we say things like, well, God does that for some people, but not for me. I've heard that said before. Well, God will do that for so-and-so, but because He likes them. But He won't do it for me. Can I tell you, and there's no bigger lie that the enemy tries to perpetrate on you and me than causing us to believe God won't be there for us, that you're somehow less than? You know who God's favorite is in here? All of us. Every one of you should have raised your hand. You're God's favorite. You're like, well, I don't know. I don't think He likes me. Trust me. He likes you a whole bunch. A whole bunch. He gave it all for you. But if we're not careful, we can start thinking, well, we look at God through the eyes of the problem instead of looking at the problem through the eyes of God, and we see the problem is bigger than God. Well, I can't bring this to God because I don't think He can handle it. Or we're afraid He might handle it differently than we want. Okay, a chance to be really, really honest, hopefully. How many of you have ever prayed but told God how He needed to answer it? Oh, come on, the rest of you are, I know better. Okay, part 2 of that question. How many of you have ever had God answer the way you wanted Him to and then wished He hadn't? She's like, wait a minute, God, I guess I didn't mean it. Oh, Jesus, help me. But faith requires us to trust the sovereignty of God and the faithfulness of God. And we have to know and understand that He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. He will not set us up to fail. He will not let us down. And you're like, but nobody knows how it feels. Jesus was hanging on the cross, and He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? So Jesus Christ Himself understands how it feels. Those times we feel abandoned, we feel alone, we feel like nobody's there, like nobody cares. He gets that. But in that moment, the Lord came and strengthened him and encouraged him. In the garden, He's like, if it's possible, God, if there's any other way. And then when He's resurrected, the disciples are like, this doesn't line up. 2 plus 2 does not equal 4 the way it's supposed to. We watched you die. We saw where they put you behind the big rock. We saw that they put soldiers there so nobody could get you out. This doesn't work. Yes, we saw that it was empty, but we just figured somebody took your body. How about you give me some food? I don't know. What if we hand you a fish and it falls to the ground because you're not really there? What if we step out in faith because we're standing on the edge of a cliff and we step out in faith, but the step that's there is only a mirage and we face plant? What if we believe you for bigger and better things only to realize, oh, well, I guess that's for somebody else? And so instead of taking that chance, Doubting for Joy says, no, I'm just going to hold that in and let this moment pass. Leonard Ravenhill, on his tombstone, it says this statement: the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized during the lifetime of the opportunity. And so when the opportunity is there, when God is there before you and He lays something before you and He says, this is your chance, this is your opportunity, would you believe me? Don't look back to disappointments of the past. Look ahead to the one who holds all things in the authority of His hand, and you can trust Him because He has never failed. And circumstances and situations and things that you have navigated do not change the truth that He is the Lord of all. And I know it's like, but you just don't understand. What if I look foolish? Newsflash, you already do. Sorry to burst your bubble. What if it falls apart? The only way it falls apart is if we keep it in our hands. But when it's in His hands, it's always held together. The Bible says He measures the universe with the span of His hand. And the cool part of that, it says He has graven you on His palm. His palm says Amy. His palm says Tiffany, Teresa, Jody, on and on and on. And so He's able to keep. He's able to hold. So how do we combat this? How do we navigate this? Number one, you got to bring it into the open. Just bring it into the open. Rip off the Band-Aid. This stupid thumb. There was infection in there. And it wasn't going to come out on its own. And when the doctor started cutting it, I wanted to punch him in the face. I was in his office and he says, I apologize. This is not going to be pleasant. We've got to deal with this right now. And he took a needle and he put a numbing agent in my hand that did nothing other than make him feel better. And then he put a tourniquet on it so I couldn't move. And it was, And then he goes, this is not going to feel good. But what was inside was eating away and was destroying me, and it had to be cut open and brought into the open. It wasn't fun. I would not wish it on anyone, and I don't plan to relive it. Even though sometimes it happens. In my mind, I'm like, oh my God, there I am again. There was an appointment a few weeks after that. He was going to take the drain plug out, and I'm like, ugh. He goes, it's not going to be that bad. Relax. I guess it was like PTSD or something, flashback to when he was, But if I did not allow him to expose what was going on inside, it would have gone beyond my thumb and got into the rest of me. And sometimes in our lives, the things that we're trying to keep hidden by protecting ourselves are the very things that are destroying us from the inside. I wish I didn't have to say that. But we have to bring it into the open. And secondly, we have to allow Jesus to reveal a fresh perspective of himself. Allow him to show himself in this moment. Because you know what happened as Dr. Stewart was cutting? I think he enjoyed it. What is wrong with this guy? I'm thankful to God that he was there. He's been great to me. I invited him to Ireland when I was on anesthetic. Saying, hey, Doc, you want to go with me? I don't know what else I said to him. He told me as long as I follow his protocol, he'll never tell what I said, so thankful. So I take my antibiotics, I work on my exercises, I'm doing what I'm supposed to. But as he's cutting things away, you know what happened? When he got, there came a point he goes, I found life again. You know what happened when he found life again? I felt life again. And suddenly all that pain didn't matter. It didn't hurt anymore. Somehow, some way. When he got rid of all the death. When he got rid of all the decay. When he got rid of all the junk that was destroying me. Suddenly, a fresh perspective of Jesus means you see life again. Because he is life. And so when that happened, I'm like, that's not so bad. I didn't want to look at it. It didn't look pretty. But I'm thankful because without that happening, because I wanted to say, no, I'll just deal with it. I'll get through it. It's going to be okay. But sometimes it's okay to put yourself in the hands of a good, or in the case with Jesus, a great physician. Sometimes there are things that he has to cut away that we need to have cut away. And with that, number 3, allow the healing to take place. The disciples were filled with joy as they realized it really was Jesus. Allow the healing to take place. Now, I wish, specifically in relation to this thumb, I wish on that Tuesday when he cut out, on the next day, on Wednesday, it was perfect. But it's a process. I'm still working on it. I wish everything was a miracle, an instant. But some things are healing, and healing's a process sometimes. So for the love of God, do yourself a favor. You know what the Bible says? We have faith as a grain of mustard seed, right? When you plant your mustard seed, if you don't see a miracle, don't give up on healing. What do I mean? Here's what I mean. Here's what we do. You probably heard me say this before, but pretend you haven't. We get down, we plant our seed of faith. Oh, God, you can do it. Oh, God, you can do it. Nothing happens. We dig it up and go home. because we want the miracle. Okay, fine. Believe for the miracle and wait for the healing. Because the last I checked, I've never seen anybody hold a mustard seed in their hand and have it instantly become a tree. The seeds that you plant and you believe God for, give them time to grow. Some of the things you're afraid to believe God for, you just didn't give enough time to develop. Allow the healing to take place. Doubting for joy. Man, in this series, I had no idea it was going to go this long. I'm not going to apologize for it because I needed it. And you all got to listen to me talk to myself. But as we navigate this stuff with emotion and these things, and sometimes we're so desperately trying to protect ourselves, and we get insulated, and we think, well, it's never going to be as good as it used to be, and this and that and the other, and we're like, I just don't think I can progress, I don't think I can move forward. But I'm telling you, the worst possible thing that we can do is stand still and do nothing. They get to the Red Sea. Moses says, it sounds spiritual, and somehow he said it like this: stand still and see the salvation of God. I'm sure that's how he sounded. And God says, quiet down, Tina. That's what he said. God said, quiet down, Tina. That's right. But he says, stand still. He's like, watch, this is going to be awesome. And God says, what are you doing? He goes, we're waiting. He said, why are you waiting? Stretch out your hand. Stretch out your rod. Part the waters. What? Ain't that your job? Because you know the Bible talks about that they were to follow the cloud by day and the fire by night, right? And they come to a place and they're standing, the Red Sea is in front of them, the Egyptian army barreling down from their back, approaching them. And when it came time for them to cross the Red Sea, the Bible says the cloud moved from in front of them to behind them to protect them from the Egyptians. Remember that? In Exodus 14. So what dawned on me one day, if it was in front of them, then the cloud was already out over the Red Sea. God was already moving across the Red Sea. He didn't stop, they did. And Moses says, stand still and watch. He goes, what are you talking about? He's working his way across already. What are they waiting for? He's like, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? Can we really believe for the big stuff? And so sometimes we're like, well, I'll just stand here and wait for God to do it. But God says, what are you talking about? I've already laid the path out before you. It's time to keep moving. And then so they cross the waters. And then when they get over there, Moses is told by God, all right, now close it back up. Can you imagine? But God, what if? I mean, he had no basis on which to go on. He's like, I've never tried this before. But he trusted God. And he reached out by faith. And God responded. But what would have happened if they would have stood there in that moment and be like, but what if it doesn't work? And the Egyptians would have said, we'll take it from here. The worship team can join me if they would, please. I want to conclude this with something that's a little different for me. On Tuesday morning, I was just up and reading and praying. And the Lord began to speak to me and began to stir my heart. Now, when I say the Lord speaks to me, I have never been one to hear an audible voice from God. I know people who have, and I think that would be cool, but also kind of freaky. Sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. But there's just something in my spirit that there's a stirring and a knowing when the Lord is showing me some things or speaking to me about things. And typically, he's always, when God speaks, it's always going to align with his word. He's not going to contradict his written word, and we understand that. We're talking about the gifts of the Spirit on Wednesday nights. If you have a chance to come out, it's pretty fun. We're trying our best to navigate it as quickly as we can, and it's just like, wow, it's awesome. good interaction and discussion, and we're doing that because we want opportunity. You know, if you lay the foundation, God can do stuff. It's pretty cool. But with that, God's been challenging me too, and so he asked me on Tuesday morning, he said, I want you to begin to make some prophetic declarations over the church. I said, okay, what do you want to say to me? He goes, you missed what I said. I want you to make some prophetic declarations over the church. And I said, how's that work? He said, it's already in you. Quit waiting to hear something new from me and speak what I've already put in you. Okay. So many times we sit back and we think, oh, I need a word right now. I need a word right now. And that's fine. Sometimes God can do that, and I love it when he does. But sometimes we just need to speak what is already in us. Because God has already placed inside of you everything you need for success in his kingdom. Many times it's just a matter of being willing to let it come out. And one of the things that God has called our family to do is we're provokers. Not in a bad way, but God has called us to provoke and to stir up and to draw out of you what he's put in you. I'm not here to add something to you you're lacking. I'm here to pull out of you what God placed in you that maybe some others have suppressed. And we're going to blow the lid off all that stuff. Uncap the wells. Sound good? But I want you to hear because I sat down at the couch early Tuesday morning, and since I don't type so fast with one thumb right now on my phone, I did it voice. And it actually understood all of my words, Ryan. But I want you to hear what this is my prophetic declaration for Crossroads. Dejection, disappointment, and discouragement are not our testimony. We have a great history. We have a greater future. As I have declared on many occasions, the best is yet to come. Do not be afraid to believe God for greater things than you have ever seen in your life, in your midst, in your family, and in your community. This day marks a strategic turning point for you individually and for this church corporately. While we will be thankful for where we have been, we will realize that is not where we are. And that is a very good thing. The best is yet to come. There have been dreams, promises, prophetic declarations, and things that you have believed God for in this church and in your lives. He has not forgotten any of them. And His word will not return void. This is the day that the Lord has made. Therefore, let us rejoice and be glad in it. The anchor has been cut. The sail has been raised. And God is sending a fresh wind to move us forward at a new and rapid pace. I'm going to read that part again. The anchor has been cut. The sail has been raised. And God is sending a fresh wind to move us forward at a new and rapid pace. Do not turn back. Do not shrink back. Do not allow any lie from without or from within to take away His truth. He will accomplish His plan in us, for us, and through us. That is my prophetic declaration for Crossroads. Would you stand to your feet in this place? very simply put, is this. In light of all of the doubts and misunderstandings and the things that the enemy is trying to bring against so many of us, if that resonates in your spirit, and as Debbie said, if you receive that, I would ask you, if you would not mind to do so, to step out of your seat and to come to this altar, and let's spend some time celebrating, rejoicing, and receiving God's word for us as a body, and to begin to step in, not step back, not stand still, but to step forward, to step in to His promise, to His fulfillment, to His plan for you, for me, for us. If that's you and you receive that today, I would ask you to step out of your seat and come into this altar, and let's celebrate the Lord together in this place.